Okay, this is lesson 6-4, circles, page 294 in your book. Basically, we need to define the circle to understand it. And a circle is a set of points on a plane that are a fixed distance from a given point called the center. So in our picture over here, we have a center right there. That center is exactly the same distance from the black line, which is our circle, all the way around. And that distance is always called the radius. So this 3 here on that green line is the radius, and every line that starts at the center point and comes out to the black line, no matter how you draw it, right like that, no matter how you draw it, that's going to be 3 units long. Okay, so let's get rid of that guy for right now. And let's go back to what's the next thing we need to talk about, and that'd be diameter. Well, what is the radius? That's from the center point out. Well, the diameter is just from one side of the circle to the other side of the circle, but through the center point. It has to go through the center. If it doesn't go through the center, it's not a diameter. And well, what does that mean? Well, let's take a look. If from the center point out, from this center point out right here, from our center point out is always going to be 3, the size of the radius, and we know the radius is 3 right here. So then this point out is 3, but this point out the other way is also 3, and the diameter always is twice the radius, or 2 times 3, or 6. So you can see that down here in this part, we talk about the diameter is always twice the radius. And so there's a little formula, D equals 2R. All that means is tell you is the diameter is twice as big as the radius, and you can see it from this drawing up here that if I go from the center point out, I know that's 3, or the size of the radius, and if I draw a single line straight through there, I'm going to have 2 radiuses. 2 radiuses added together are the diameter. All right, so let's erase some of that. Get back to kind of our simple diagram now. Last we want to know is the red line. The red line all the way around our circle is the distance around the circle is called the circumference. Okay, so that red line represents how far it is to go around the circle. Okay, and there is a formula for the circumference of a circle. It is pi times diameter. Okay, I'll underline it in green here. Pi times diameter, or since the diameter is just 2 times r, there's my 2r and pi at the middle, so 2 pi r is also circumference. So when I know the diameter, I just multiply it times pi to get the circumference. When I know the radius, I multiply it times 2 to get to the diameter, and then times pi to get to the circumference. So here's an example using the diameter, pi times 6. And remember, I'm using this formula up here, that our diameter is 6, or I use the second line here, pi times 2 times 3, 3 being the radius. Either way, we come out with the same answer, basically 18.8 units. So find the circumference. Well, if we remember in this picture, we have the radius given to us. So since the radius is given to us, we're going to use the 2 pi r formula, substitute in our radius of 5. 5 times 2 gives us our 10. We still have our pi, and if we were told to answer in pi, that would be a good enough answer, 10 pi centimeters. If we're told to answer in decimal, we would have to get rid of that pi by multiplying times 3.14, and then we get approximately 31.4 centimeters for our circumference. Now we look at this circle over here where our diameter is 1.5. Well, since our diameter is 1.5, we're going to use the pi times d as our formula for the circumference. So all we have to do is plug in the 1.5 So 1.5 pi inches is our diameter. Multiply that times 3.14 instead of using the term pi, and we come up with approximately 4.7 inches in our circumference. And remember, the circumference is the distance around the distance all the way around our circle. Okay? So now the area of the circle has a different formula. It's pi r squared. So basically, when I have a radius of 3 here in this circle example, I copy down my formula, pi r squared. Well, I looked at my radius is 3, so I substitute 3 in for r, and 3 squared is just 9, so I end up with 9 pi units squared. And that is a good enough answer right there. Okay? Find the area. This time it says, give me 2 answers for each, one using pi and one using 3.14 for pi. So we've got a 5 radius in example A. So there's our radius equal 5 centimeters. Here's our formula, pi r squared. R is 5, so we substitute the 5 in. 5 squared gives us 25. 25 pi, and it's in centimeters, so it's centimeters squared. And there's our first answer. We've done one of our 2 answers. We've done this one. Now we have to do the second answer. Well, to do that, all you do is take that first answer and replace the pi with 3.14, and you multiply that out, and you approximately get 78.5 centimeters squared. So there's our second answer. Now we go over to B. Here, we'll do letter B. It's the same diameter that we had before, 1.5. So this time, because we're using the area formula, which needs us to know r, we're going to divide the diameter by 2, which is 1.5 divided by 2, to get our radius. Because remember, there are 2 radiuses in one diameter. So 0.75 is now our r. We substitute it in the square. We do that square function. We get 0.5625 pi inches squared. When we multiply that times 3.14, we approximate the answer, because 3.14 isn't exactly pi. We multiply those 2 out, we get approximately 1.8 inches squared. You'll notice that circumference is a length measure, and it is just in centimeters or whatever unit you have, whereas area is always in a squared unit. So now let's use a graph. We say we have a center point at -1, 1. That's this point right here. So I can see it, I'll mark it here in this orange. There we go. It's in orange. So it says that it passes through -1, 3. Well, that's the point I made in red. So if the center point is our orange point, and we know the circle goes through the red point, we know that our radius is 2. So I'm just going to pop in a couple more radiuses, kind of in a dotted line, make a little plus sign here, all going out 2 units. And I then can draw, I'm going to try and draw my circle freehand in red, knowing that I'm going to go to each of these. And that's not very good drawing, but you can see how that would work. So there's my circle, not the best circle drawn, but you can see that it has a radius of 2. So since it has a radius of 2, we're supposed to find the area and the circumference in 2 answers again. So there's my area. My radius is 2, so 2 squared gives me 2 times 2, or 4 pi units. Multiply that times 3.14, and there's my second answer for the area, 2.6 units squared. If I come down here to get the circumference, remember I can use 2 pi r, because I know r is 2. So 2 times 4, or 2 times 2 is 4. I get 4 pi units. Oh, look at this. 4 pi times 3.14, I get 12.16, which I should have got over here. I accidentally erased that. There we go. So I've got the same answer in both sides, except circumference is a length. It's only units long, whereas area is an area, and that is always in units squared. But other than that, the calculations were the same. All right, let's say a wheel turns 147 times. The diameter of that wheel is 4 1/3 foot, or 4/3 of 1 foot. How far did the wheel travel? We know that if it travels one time around, it's going to go 4/3 of a foot. Okay, so our problem here says instead of using 3.14 per pi, let's use the fraction 22/7. Okay, so we're going to do that. So I've drawn the picture. Here's our wheel. We know the diameter is 4.3. We need to find the circumference. And I said that wrong earlier. The diameter is 4/3 of a foot. The circumference is going to be pi times that 4/3. Okay, so 22/7 is what we're supposed to use with 4/3. There's no cross canceling that can go on there. So the top of my fraction is 22 times 4. The bottom is 7 times 3. That gives me 88/21, which is 1 revolution. And then that's of a foot. And then I'm going to have 147 revolutions, excuse me. So now when I multiply times 147, I can see that I can cross cancel. 121 goes into 147 7 times, so that cross cancels to a 1 and a 7. I multiply 88 times 7, and that wheel, when it travels 147 times, ends up going 616 feet. So let's try this. Area of a circle. Well, what's the formula for area of a circle? Pi r squared. They tell us that r is 1, so pi 1 squared. That's just 1 squared is just 1. 1 times pi is pi. So we could say we were pi units long, or we could multiply times 3.14, and we could say we are 3.14 units long. So units squared, excuse me, not long. Area, units squared. So both of those would be acceptable answers, unless I was asked to produce one or the other. Now the circumference is just, let's go around that circle. So we know that circumference, when we know the diameter, we say is pi d. Well, pi times 1 is just pi. So we could say pi units this time because it is circumference. Or we could say 3.14 units and use the approximation sign when we multiply the 1 pi times 3.14. So basically the trick here is on circumference is, do you know diameter or radius? And then use either 2 pi r if you know radius, or pi d if you know diameter. And on the area of a circle, it's always pi r squared. So you have to make sure you know r. Once you know r, you can do the squared part, multiply times pi, and come up with your final answer. And that's all there is to circles.